Alrighty, Pure and Strong people. My name is Alan, and I kind of suck at making introductions, but I'm going to do my very best to introduce myself so you guys know who I am, what I do, and why do I have like a say in what I'm actually going to present right now. So first of all, I am a student of John Garafano. I've been working with him for the last 7 months, if I'm not mistaken. I am a long time fan of RTS. I learned a lot through the content that you guys have put up. I've learned a lot through the courses that I've actually bought, and just within the last 7 months, I actually decided to jump on board and get working under an RTS coach. And it's been a fantastic time working with John. He's an excellent coach. I definitely learned a lot, and I still have like a lot to actually learn. So I'm super excited with this journey. I am a coach myself. I am coaching through my own business, but I'm also a coach at Big Benches. So I am working through in the field. I'm a little bit of a technique freak in some sense. And this is where a conversation with John kind of, led to this presentation, because there aren't too many, let's say, presentations within the RTS community, specifically on technique. So he actually suggested, hey, why not just, come forth and show some of your expertise and present some of your ideas. Give some of this value, and you know what I said. I said, hell yeah, let's freaking do it. Got me connected with Mel. Mel, thank you for making this happen. So here we are talking about the foot position in the bench and how this is actually influencing your leg drive. So before we're diving deep into it, because it's going to be a little bit comprehensive. There are a couple of details that we want to touch upon. But before we're actually talking about foot position, we need to understand leg drive in general and why leg drive really matters. And whenever I'm talking about leg drive, I like to present two analogies that are going to be very relevant to the importance of leg drive. The first one is you cannot fire a cannon off a canoe. A canoe is very unstable. A cannon carries a lot of force. So no matter how strong you really are, and you think that you have big pecs, big triceps, big shoulders, and you just have the power to actually bench a lot, some of that power, some of that strength is going to be dissipated by the time you're actually initiating the press. Because if your setup is sloppy, if it's loosey-goosey, you are going to lose stability. If you're losing stability, your shoulders, your capacity of your shoulder blades, and your shoulders in general to actually keep stability and transfer that force to the elbows and to the barbell is going to be dissipated. So stability is absolutely fundamental, and leg drive is the foundation. Leg drive is keeping you rooted to the bench. Leg drive is pretty much keeping everything together. The second analogy, I want you guys to imagine trying to build up a tent, okay? And you have like 4 tent stands. But for the simplicity of it, we only have like 2 tent stands, okay? So you have the first one, which is the shoulder blades, and the other one, which is the legs. Okay, yeah, you can pull all your force on one of them, to keep it rooted. But if you're not keeping the other one rooted, which are the legs, the tent will not stay erect. It's actually going to collapse. So you need to create tension on both ends. You need to create tension by thinking of your scaps and depressing your scaps hard, elevating your chest as high as possible. But you also need the legs to actually push you back and use that push into your shoulders to keep that extension as high as possible. So if leg drive is not there, no matter how mobile you are to actually get into that position, you're going to lose it because you do not have the other tent stand that keeps the tent erect. So, what leg drive is and what it isn't. It's not a violent push off the bench. Okay, so just going down with the bar and after that just using the legs to actually lift it up and giving it a little bit of momentum. That's not leg drive. They're just, humping your glutes up in the hopes of actually getting the bar up. It's actually a sustained, controlled tension pushing towards your shoulders. And sustained is the key, because we want that leg drive to be on from the moment in which we unrack to the moment in which we start the descent to the moment in which we're doing the repetition or the first repetition, and we're continuing with the rest of the repetitions until we're actually finishing the last repetition and we start to actually rack the bar back. Because anytime we start to lose that tension coming from the legs, that's when we start to lose position. That's when we start to lose some of that arch. That's when we start to lose some of the stability that we actually initially created. So you should feel like you're pushing or spreading the floor away. And we're going to find, in which case should you think about pushing the floor, and in which case should you think about spreading the floor away, because there are some nuances in regards to that. So without further ado, these are the leg drive variations. So choose your style. Now this is just a general overview of it, because we're going to dive a little bit more deeper into it. But we can have a vertical shin or feet tucked, close stance or wide stance, in any combination in between them. Okay, so with a vertical shin, you can have a close stance, you can have a wide stance. With feet tucked, you can have a close stance, or you can actually have a wide stance. So before we're taking pretty much every one of those options, we need to understand some concepts in regards to anatomy. Because leg drive and the way we're actually connecting with the floor, the first principle of leg drive is to find a foot position in which we have a really good connection with the floor. If we do not have a good connection with the floor, we're not going to be able to actually apply leg drive properly, and we were not able to actually apply that leg drive to our shoulders or to our traps to keep stability in there. So the hips are pretty much a ball and socket joint, but not all ball and socket joints are the same from individual to individual, and there are a few considerations that we should be taking under account. Now it's going to get a little bit technical, but for the sake of the conversation, I'm going to make it as easy to understand as possible. There are a few things that do change from individual to individual. Okay, so the first one would be the femoral version. Okay, femoral version means pretty much the hip socket and the angle of your femur, how it is placed. So you can actually have your femur a little bit more inwards oriented, which is a femoral anteversion, or it can actually be a little bit more external oriented, which is femoral retroversion. Anteversion obviously is going to bias a little bit more internal rotation, and retroversion is going to bias some more external rotation. The other one, acetabular orientation, which in more of a easy way to talk about it, the hip socket orientation. We can have deep orientation of it to be a little bit more forward. Okay, so just slightly forward oriented, which would be the anteversion, which just like with the femoral version is going to bias some internal rotation, and the retroversion is just going to be the hips, hip socket facing somewhat backwards, and it's going to bias some more external rotation. In the same line, the neck shaft angle, we can have the neck shaft angle be a little bit more horizontal, or it can be a little bit more vertical. To the degrees of it, that's going to judge whether or not it should be a little bit more horizontal or a little bit more vertical. So if you're a little bit more horizontal, you're going to bias, you're going to have a little bit more mobility to go through more external rotation. You're pretty much, your abductors are going to have a lot more leverage. In comparison to having it a little bit more vertical, it's going to kind of, get you clogged up, and you're not going to have as much mobility in an external rotation position. You do not have as much of a leverage for your abductors. So because of that, you may potentially want to bias some more internal rotation in the way you're actually setting up for the leg drive. And the last one is pretty much the pelvic orientation, which is, an anterior pelvic tilt or posterior pelvic tilt. An anterior pelvic tilt, simply put, is going to bias some degree of external rotation, and internal and posterior pelvic tilt is going to bias to some degree some internal rotation. So with these in mind, we know that, hey, based on how our hips are actually built, and you can't really know off a go exactly how your hips are really built, you're actually going to find out when you play with your leg drive. So the first observation should be, hey, what's feeling comfortable for me? What can actually make me feel like I am really well grounded to the floor? If you find that one, you can actually access that, force into your traps. That means that, hey, that's the leg drive that you want to, chase. So this is why it's going to, differ from individual to individual. It's not really one size fits all, but understanding these concepts is going to be a little bit easier when you're getting on the bench and trying to apply those, to your bench. Is going to be easier to, play around and actually understand that concept and apply it to your own training. But there is yet another layer. What about femur? Because even the femur can actually influence to some degree the leg drive and how we apply the leg drive, and how we may potentially find like a good position to actually sit in. To start with the long femur individuals are obviously going to have a longer lever between the hip and the knee. Okay, so the knees are going to tend to sit a little bit higher relative to the hips. The hip flexion is going to increase a little bit more easily. The small foot adjustments are going to create a large hip angle change, and it's going to become a little bit harder to keep the shins vertical, because you just have, if you have really long femurs, usually you also have like a really long, let's say, shin. And because of that, when you're actually setting up, if you're actually setting up in a vertical shin angle and you're very, very tall, considering the fact that, all the competition benches have kind of the same, height, in some cases you may potentially have the knee pretty high in comparison to the hip. So it's going to be very difficult to actually apply leg drive. So you have a couple of options if you're very, very long femur, an individual that has very long femurs. The first one is to actually, tuck your feet back, go with a narrower stance so you have a lot more connection against the floor. You're going to have an easier time applying more forward directly leg drive, and you should chase a setup in which you can actually increase the arch as much as possible, which obviously having the feet tuck is going to help quite a lot with that. With the short femur individuals, however, depending on how short it is, you're gonna have a little bit more leeway with it. So the short femur individuals have a shorter hip to knee lever. So the knees sit lower relative to the hips. The vertical shin setups are a little bit easier because you just have the knee a little bit lower. The pelvis stays more stable with wider stances, but you can actually stay stable also with a narrower stance. And the hip extension demands are a little bit lower. So many lifters with short femurs are going to feel stronger with a vertical shin setup, with a relatively wider stance, and more glute-driven leg drive, and just thinking about spreading the floor. But again, take under consideration the fact that these are general ideas. Just like I actually presented the general ideas of how the hip can actually influence directly your leg drive, whether or not you should bias more internal rotation or more external rotation. You're going to find people that are going to have success as short femur individuals with having their feet tucked. And at the same time, you're also going to find individuals with long femurs that are going to have an easier time with, feet in front. So the degree of it and how your hips are actually built is going to influence that to some degree. Again, it all comes down to experimentation, to actually, trying things out and seeing exactly what works and what doesn't. So let's start off with the foot positions. Let's start with the vertical shin, okay? Vertical shin is more quad dominant in terms of how you apply pressure. It requires a lot more control. It gives a lot more control, but it requires active leg drive. So it requires you to constantly think about pressing back, constantly thinking about, almost sliding off the floor so you can actually apply that leg drive properly. From the moment in which you relax your leg drive, everything is going to fall. So it's a lot more demanding. It's a very active leg drive. Now, due to the fact that you're applying a lot of pressure in this angle, you're going to have the touch point a little bit higher. So having the legs a little bit more in front is going to kind of shift that force back into your traps. And because of that, you're just going to have that sternum a little bit higher. So who may prefer it? Lifters who actually feel jam when their feet are tucked far back. And you're going to feel that. Lifters whose hips just dislike aggressive extension, or who need more control and less complexity. And lifters who lose hip contact when trying to leg drive too hard. As a trade-off, it may feel, for some individuals, it may feel like you're less arched into position, but it's a little bit more sustainable. It's a type of foot position that really gives you, if properly applied, is going to give you a lot more, let's say, predictability in the way you're actually applying it. The other one, the opposite end, is going to be the feet tucked, okay? You're going to have kind of less, quad drive, because you just do not really have that, angle with the knee and the hip to actually really apply that leg drive in there. Can arch more through the lower back. You have a little bit less of a control. I'm trying to be careful with, the words that I'm actually using right now, because again, there are nuances to it. But in generally speaking, you're going to have less control than the vertical shin. You're going to be more in a passive leg drive. You're going to, due to the fact that you have your quads pretty much stretched and your glutes are, in direct contact with the bench, you're going to rely a little bit more on that passive tension. Now, due to the fact that you're having your legs as far under you, the touch point is going to be a little bit lower, because when you're pulling your feet a little bit more under, you're kind of shifting that center of mass more forward. And because of that, when you're going down with the bar, it's going to touch a little bit lower towards like the upper part of your abs. Now that's going to be dependent on the grip, on your arm length that you're actually having, on your frame, so how really wide you are. Who may prefer it? Lifters who tolerate more hip extension comfortably, who can maintain pelvic control under tension, and who can actually get a better upper back wedge by actually having their feet turned back. It's a higher setup payoff, but it's less predictable, especially if you're a pretty big individual and you're also relying on some of that sync. It's a little bit unpredictable on how you're actually applying that leg drive and you're timing that sync with that leg drive forcing, because you do need to kind of push the knee forward to make room for that sync. And after that, timing that up with the press to actually push that knee back so you have success with the press. So I'm going to move my face around because there is a lot to talk on this one. So let's talk about the close stance. So, we tried to see exactly how the foot position from a more of a horizontal perspective is actually looking like. Now we're going to see how it's going to play out with a close stance or a wide stance. So a close stance is going to bias quads a little bit more. You can even hug the bench. It probably is going to be easier for balance for the vertical shin and wide grip. But that's going to depend a lot on your femur length. So it's not, not a one size fits all. Who may actually prefer it? Those who feel strong driving straight down into the floor. And this works very, very well with individuals that are using flats in the bench. And in all honesty, I'm very biased with this advice. I would prefer to see athletes use flats more than anything in the bench press, whether you're using feet tucked or feet forward, or close stance or wide stance. I just feel like the flats give you like a lot more, let's say, control over your heel, and that is an important proprioceptive let's say angle that kind of tells you that, hey, you can actually apply pressure back into your shoulders. Those who prefer a vertical shin position or who struggle to maintain balance with a wider stance, lifters with narrower pelvises, structures who feel cramped when spreading the feet too far, or who want a more quad drive driven leg drive, and who prioritize setup consistency over control. Now, as trade-off, it may produce less lateral stability compared to a wider stance. Some lifters may feel less glute engagement because you just have your legs so close together. It may limit how aggressively some athletes can spread the floor, so you're not going to be able to actually think about spreading the floor. All you really have in this position is to actually just apply that tension forward. And for lifters with wider pelvis structures, it may feel too narrow to create a strong foot pressure. So in terms of this position, whenever you're trying to apply that force, you can think about spreading your legs or just driving the knee out, but still you kind of have to have the knee to some degree in line with your toes. So whenever you're trying to actually make use of your glutes or just squeeze your glutes to have a more stable hip position, you really have to open up your legs a lot. So it's a little bit hard to actually open your feet and drive your knee out while you're having your feet close together. So this is why you're going to bias a lot more quad in comparison to glutes. But with a wide stance, you have a lot more leeway to use your glutes, and you're probably going to have less of a connection with the quads due to the position in which you're going to find yourself. So the wide stance is going to be more glute biased. It's going to be easier to actually balance for close grip. Usually when you're coming a little bit close, you're going to need some more lateral stability because the grip is actually getting a little bit narrower. So who may prefer it? Lifters who naturally feel strong spreading the floor with wide pelvis structures, who rely heavily on glute tension for stability, who struggle to maintain balance with a narrower stance, of course, who use close grip benching, where wider feet can actually improve stability, and those who want a broader base of support under heavy attempts. As trade-offs, it requires greater hip mobility and tolerance for abduction. So if you do not really have the mobility, you kind of have to work, with mobility. Some lifters may find it harder to create direct forward leg drive. If it is too wide, force can become less directed towards the rack. It may feel less compact and harder to actually organize during the setup. It's going to be easier with a closer stance to actually get your feet let's say, evenly placed. But when you're starting to actually spread your feet around, that's when it becomes a little bit more unpredictable, because one of those feet might actually be farther back in comparison to the other one, and that to some degree is going to influence your hips, and your hips are going to influence the position of your spine, and the position of your spine is going to influence the position of your scaps, and of course this position of your scaps is going to kind of influence directly your press. So it's just a little bit less predictable in comparison to the closed stance. But again, that's not to say that this stance is not good. That's not to say that any of these stance is better, generally speaking, in comparison to the other ones. It all comes down to you. It all comes down to the individual. It all comes down to what you're actually feeling comfortable with. Again, the whole idea and the principle that let's say the first principle should always be: am I having a good connection with the floor? If I do not have a good connection with the floor, that means that I cannot apply leg drive. So no matter how much I'm trying to apply leg drive into my neck or into my shoulders, I just cannot physically do it, because I do not find a position in which I'm actually feeling comfortable enough to use that tension. And indeed, there can be some, let's say you're more externally rotated bias, but you just do not have much mobility to actually do so. So you have to start with more of an internally rotated position to actually apply leg drive, and just work your way up by building your mobility into more of an external rotation. So that can be the case. That can be the case too. But again, experiment, play around. Don't be afraid to try new things. Just make sure that you're actually trying one thing at a time. So, give it like two weeks to try one particular foot position, because there is a learning curve too. There is another learning curve for your central nervous system. There is a learning curve for you applying that leg drive. So try it, but give it some time to see whether or not it works or not. In closing, I would like to give you guys some analogies for a strong leg drive, because imagination is actually an amplifier of action. I have some analogies that I like to use with my athletes whenever I want to bring more intention to the leg drive. The first analogy is: imagine you have a very thin layer of glass underneath the bench, and that layer of glass is right under your glutes. Your mission is to not make that glass break. So you have to support your whole lower body weight into your legs. If you let go of that tension, your glutes are going to start to touch the bench, or just sink into the bench, and that's going to break the glass. And guess what's going to happen with that glass? That's going to hurt your ass. So you do not want that. You want that thin layer of glass. You can think about it. Either I do not want to break it, or it's just way too expensive and I do not want to break it. Any of these are going to work really well. Another analogy that I like to use is: imagine you have a scale underneath your glutes. That scale has to read 0 at all times. So all the weight of your glutes should be within your legs. So no weight, that should be 0.0000 at all times. That's going to assure you that you're barely touching the bench with your glutes, and you're keeping all that lower body tension into your legs. Another analogy is: imagine you have half a bench, and that and the half that's actually missing was the one that's near your glutes. You got a bench just the same without any support on the bench, and you have an example in here supported by this bench, and you're just keeping everything in here. It should not change. It should not be any different. It should be exactly the same. You should be benching exactly the same, whether or not you have like full bench or half a bench. And analogy number 4, which is my absolute favorite when I need to bring that intention into the leg drive, is this is not a bench workout. You're not using your shoulders, you're not using your chest, you're not using your triceps. That's not the focus. I want you, when you're getting into your bench session, to walk with soreness into your legs. I want you to actually turn the bench session into a leg workout. When you manage to do that, your setup will just feel so freaking solid that the pressing part is just coming by itself. So I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. I hope you got some value out of it. If you guys have any particular questions for me, you can drop them down in the comment section, or you can always reach out to me on Instagram. So yeah, that's pretty much it. If you guys enjoyed it and you would like to actually see some more of these presentations, just let me know, and I can talk with Mel, and maybe we can do something about it. Catch you guys later, and I hope you guys have a fantastic week or weekend, whatever it is right now as you're watching this this presentation, and keep kicking ass in your training. See you.